G'day, Lockie here. So I am back from KubeCon. It was wonderful seeing everybody there at KubeCon, and thanks for coming up and having wonderful conversations with me last week. I've only just regained my voice and we're about a week past KubeCon, but I had a great time. There were some really cool announcements, so I figured I'd do an OSS unboxing on one announcement that I had a hand in actually working on. And shed a little bit of light about what we have here. And this is a project called Osiris, which boasts lightweight Kubernetes scale to zero. What is scale to zero? So I have the blog up here on the screen. But basically, we can scale down workloads when they're not being used. We can determine when they're not being used, and we can scale those deployments to zero. And we have a lightweight way that when they need to be used, they can be reactivated and scaled back up. So there's a blog on the open.microsoft.com blog site about Osiris and how it works. There's also some details about how it interacts with cluster autoscalers and horizontal pod autoscalers and things like that. But I encourage you to have a look if you're interested in this. But if you pop over to github/daislabs/Osiris, you can take a look and follow through. So I figured I'd show the demo end to end, and let's see what we're working with here. Let's get started. So I just have a 3-node Kubernetes cluster here, a master and 3 agents there, and then down the bottom I'm just bumped the font here. Looks like we've got a font. There we go. Okay, so we should be good to go. I just have a standard cluster, nothing on it. It says we need Helm. I think I have Helm on this cluster. Let's take a look. I do. I have Helm 2.12 running there. We're going to add a repo. So this is hosted on ACR by the looks of it, the Helm repository that is. So it's going to give us access to the Osiris chart. Fantastic, that's done. And we're going to do a Helm install here of Osiris Edge. And give it the development flag, which means we can get the latest features. Now, while that's happening, I will do this. kubectl will get pods in the namespace Osiris system, because I see that this particular release, Helm release, will be installed in that namespace, or at least we're telling it to do that. So it should see a whole bunch of resources in Helm status. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so we've got a couple of secrets here. We have, by the looks of it, some service account, cluster role binding, a service, 2 services, I should say, endpoints hijacker and a proxy injector, and several deployments, 5 deployments here, and 2 mutating webhook configurations. So we'll go into how all these things interact in a second, but they've all come up and running. So we see those pods up and running here. Now, just what we have here with the activator, it reactivates scale to 0, so it holds the actual incoming request while the deployment's being scaled up, and then forwards that request onto the endpoints that deployment has, so the pod IPs. Endpoints controller, so this is how we control the actual service endpoints. The endpoints hijacker, everything is explicit in Osiris world, and we can go back over here. So we need to tell Osiris that it is to operate and scale to 0 on a specific deployment, and also the same for a service. So we have to create a link between the service and the deployment. That's used with annotations here rather than using the label selector. And that's where that hijacker comes in. It's looking for services with that specific annotation and modifying the endpoints based on your requirement to do that rather than using the default endpoint controller in Kubernetes. Proxy Injector, so I think this is the sidecar that actually gets injected into your deployment, which is responsible for gathering the metrics to determine whether your pod is being used and whether it is eligible for scale to 0, and the 0 scaler scales it down to 0. So the whole bunch of stuff there, a bit of nuts and bolts, but really what I want to get to is the demo here. We've installed it, so the demo is this Hello Osiris application. So in the good spirit of taking a look at the YAML files before we apply them, let's go do that. and we could see that we had hello Osiris here. So what have we got? We have a service. We have it annotated with these different annotations here. We have load balancer. Okay, so hello, goodbye. Two different services here that we have. A label selector, and we have a deployment with some liveness probes and two different container ports there. I'm guessing that you can have it say hello and goodbye depending on which port you hit. Okay, so that looks fairly benign and safe. Not knowing what's in that container, but from a manifest point of view, it looks pretty safe to apply. So this is me as the application developer. Osiris is already running on the cluster. I would just annotate the service and the deployment as specified above if I want my workload to be eligible to be scaled to 0. So I know this is going to be in the default namespace. And how about we do, what do we see there? Let's open this back up. So the app is hello Osiris. Well, let's get a service and get the endpoints, and we're going to do a label selector. App equals hello Osiris. Okay. So we're creating that. I would expect to see a service, a deployment, and an endpoint. Now we're not using the native endpoint controller here, so you won't see an endpoint using this command. So we have hello Osiris pod running here. We have the service, and let me go back to the documentation. What have we got here? So grab the external IP here, and we should be able to hit it. Okay, we can do that. Okay, so we still don't have a service IP. Well, actually we do now. Let's have a look. Okay, so we do have this IP address. So if we curl this, right, I would expect to see this plumb through, and I should get a hello world. And that's exactly what we get. Hello world, so that's end-to-end. Going through Osiris and actually hitting this back-end application pod that we're doing. So I wonder, 4,008, so if I hit it on 80, if I hit it on 5,000, goodbye world. You'll come back real soon. Okay, wonderful. So I've hit it on both those different ports. Now, what I'm going to do is not hit that pod with any traffic at the moment. The pod is actually up and running, but while we're waiting for that to scale down, how about we go and have a look at the componentry and the associated log files for Osiris. So kubectl, kube control, get pods in the namespace Osiris system, and we will keep our eye down here about 2.5 minutes without any traffic. We should see it actually scale back down to 0. And we'll take a look at that in a second. So get the pods. Okay, activator, endpoint controller, hijacker proxy. So let's go just step through here. Kube control-n Osiris system. We're going to do a logs-f on that pod. Okay, so the activator hasn't actually logged anything. It's ready and proxying disabled. Okay, so because it's come up and it's already attached, we don't need the activator to do anything at the moment. Endpoints controller, let's see what this is logged. I would imagine it's taken the pod IP and added that to the bucket here. Okay, so 0 app pods ready for service, and we have 1 app pod ready for service. Okay, informed. Okay, so we've actually, this is the endpoint controller, so the endpoints manager has actually attached that endpoint to that service, because I imagine that label selector is not used to use the endpoint selection, the Kubernetes default label selector that takes a Kubernetes service and maps it to an endpoint. So this is taking care of that. That's the endpoint controller. What else do we have here? Hijacker. I would imagine that this is going to log, hello, I've seen the service and it's eligible for hijacking. So let's see. Yeah, okay. Hijacking service, because we've explicitly put the annotation there. I'm going to hijack it. I'm going to send it admission response. So this is using mutating webhooks in Kubernetes, and I am going to remove the path selector. Fancy that. And I'm going to add a path in the metadata with the value probably of the old selector, would be my guess, so that we could actually, if we disabled it, it'd go back to the old label selector. So basically that's looking at all the services, and if it has the right annotation, it will indeed be modified and the label selector will be removed, which means that the inbuilt Kubernetes endpoint controller won't actually access that and map a service to an endpoint. We will delegate that control to the Osiris endpoint controller. So that's happening. Proxy Injector, I'm guessing this is going to take a pod or a deployment and add admission review. So it sees the creation of a pod, it's going to patch it, and it's probably going to add the Osiris image to do the metrics collection there. Okay, yeah, metrics. And so that's exactly what it's doing. And there was one more here, the zero scaler. So let's see, this is responsible for, I like how there's these discrete little components in here, and each one has, its naming is almost synonymous. Well, it is exactly what it's doing, so it leaves no room for kind of interpretation in the name. So using existing, okay, so I'm guessing that it's minimum, it's eligible. We should see the deployment that has created the replica set. Oh, there we go, exactly right now. So scale to 0 started for this deployment in this namespace. Nothing's being collected, everything should be 0. What does that mean? Kubernetes get deployments. So we should have a deployment that is now scaled to 0. So how about we watch this thing? Watch Kubernetes get deploy. Right, we'll watch it from there. Now what I'm going to do is just trigger a curl here again, and let's watch the behavior on this, because we actually have no pods now. So curl, okay, the activator, okay, we see that the count's been updated. That should be spinning up as we speak, and then that traffic will be routed to the destination. Hello world. Okay, so we're back up and available, and if I was to go back and actually do get pods in the namespace, we'll just do this one. I should see that again for 21 seconds, that's actually back up. So that's scaled to 0 in a nutshell. Determine when there's no load or traffic on your server, scale it to 0, don't consume any resources on your cluster, and only when you have requests destined for that service do you go ahead and hold them, spin up the back end, and then route the traffic. So really great for services that are low volume or have kind of disparate access profiles, and having them available when you need them, and scaling back up. So you can only imagine if you pair this with something like virtual node, you can truly scale to 0 on your workloads and have none of it backed by actual VMs. So that would be interesting for me to take this demo to the next step and put this on virtual nodes as well. Anyway, all this to say, that is Osiris, and that's how scale to 0 works. If you have this use case, I urge you to take a look. It's just some lightweight componentry to take care of scale to 0 with the containers I already have and the pods I already have running on Kubernetes. And we encourage you to come take a look and give us your feedback. But yeah, I think it's a great little project and a great way to get scale to 0 out of the box. If you like videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. I try to publish as often as a week. I've had a few things going on in life where I've moved houses and there's been KubeCon and a few things going on, so haven't done this in a month or so. So apologize for the lack of videos, but hopefully picking up the cadence soon enough. Anyway, thanks for joining. Cheers.